Grayson on the right-hand side of your screen is going to be playing this Zur domain deck. So as far as the matchup is concerned, it's really going to be like a question of how many counter spells does Matthew Hoey have in his main deck to be able to stop, some of the bigger plays that Grayson has. Although that dynamic shifts a little bit too, because Grayson is sporting 4 copies of Cavern of Souls, and Cavern on Avatar can sort of push through the Overlords, and Grayson has 10 Overlords to pair with the 4 copies of Zur Eternal Schemer. So that specific dynamic is really something, like, it really is going to depend on how this matchup progresses.
Yeah, I mean, Tashana's Tidebinder is sort of the counter spell against the Zur deck, right? And Hoey has 2 of those in the sideboard. So clearly has some stuff here, but it's going to be interesting to see sort of as this plays out. If you've watched our championships over the years, Matthew Hoey is a name you're definitely going to recognize. Has played in every champs, Devin, except for one, the 2022 year. Some people call it one of the hardest champs we've ever had. That's the only one Hoey missed, and only by a hair. He's here and would like to get another win. Grayson, also someone who's done very well at a lot of our events, and both these players still very alive for top 8. We talked about this before, and we've seen, some of you comment who are just joining us here. It's 3-3. Why are we checking these players out? Well, they're still incredibly live for top 8. Our best record, someone is only X-1. Pod play makes it look a little different than your traditional Magic tournament, and also really test your mental. You can go like 0-6, Devin, or 0-5 and rattle back and still top 8 our event. You're not dead until you get that 6th loss here at champs, and that really allows these players to, even if you had some bad luck, let's prove it. How strong are you? And these players, both very strong, both very live, as Hoey is mulliganing down to 6.
Yeah, so Holy Mulligan to 6, and an interesting part of this matchup as well that that I didn't bring up in the beginning is Up the Beanstalk. That is an extremely powerful card, especially in combination with your Overlords and other like Sunfalls and a bunch of ways that Grayson can trigger those Up the Beanstalks. Now, Matthew does have a good card against Up the Beanstalk in Fairy Mastermind, and there just so happens to be 3 copies of Fairy Mastermind in Hoey's hand. So if Grayson were to deploy an Up the Beanstalk next turn, that's kind of exactly where Matthew wants this game to go, given the 3 masterminds at hand.
Yep, and we're seeing here Grayson went Surveiller and Surveiller land. It kept everything on top. Is playing Cavern. We'll get in a second to know what that is here. We'll probably know too, depending on what's played. And it does look like it's pointing out, and it is going to be on Avatar as the green Overlord of the Hauntwoods comes down, makes an everywhere token. That is a land with all the land types. You haven't seen it before, and Fairy Mastermind get played here. And Zur is in hand, and this is sort of one of the stronger draws this deck can have, is sort of Zur into activating on your Overlord, specifically the green one. The question is, will we have the mana? As it looks like we do have a Hushwood Verge.
Yeah, this is going to be brutal. Now, Matthew does have 2 copies of Spell Stutter in the main, and Zur is not an avatar. So Spell Stutter is counter unless you pay 2, plus an additional 1 for each fairy you control, and Mastermind is a fairy. So if Matthew did pick up a copy of Spell Stutter, can stop this Zur from entering the battlefield, but does not look like that is the case. Matthew's hand looks like a couple of Masterminds and a cut down, and this is going to be a really brutal swing here. It's, Grayson's going to be able to gain a bunch of life, get another everywhere token. Sure, Matthew can kill the Zur with a cut down, but even after that is the case, still going to be left a little bit over. I guess there is, I couldn't tell what the last card in Matthew's hand. If it's a Flood Pits Drowner, you could actually go cut down the Zur and then tap the Overlord, because it would lose hexproof after the Zur dies.
Yep. And we're seeing, it looks like Matthew here is down to let the attack trigger happen. We're going to then cut down. Might be a moment where maybe Hoey wants to develop this Fairy Mastermind to make Up the Beanstalk sort of a bad draw, right? A lot of times this Zur deck tries to use what we just saw to overpower the opponent, and then use Beanstalk to either run away with the game on turn 2 or refill in the later turns. So Hoey down to let 1 mana happen and sort of get hit for 5. The impending trigger still goes down. Not that it really matters, but that is true. As Kaito, Bane of Nightmares, was picked up from Hoey, one of the main reasons players are playing this blue-black deck. We are going to see Hoey take a second to figure out how he wants to play this here. Fountain Port is his colorless land of choice this weekend. We've seen some players use Soulstone Sanctuary to be a little bit more aggressive, and some use Fountain Port for a little bit more grinding. And
Yeah, what's interesting here is you don't typically see, I mean, in a general sense, a card like Kaido, it's a legendary card, it's a little expensive. You may be surprised to see that these Dimir decks are sporting 4 copies, but it's just so powerful. And the card lends itself to sort of like you kind of need to get it off the battlefield ASAP. And even you can even set up situations where you say, put in Kaido -2 on one of your creatures, then the next turn -2, set up another Kaido, as we see this Overlord's got quite a few dice on it, representing 3 different things here, which is pretty hilarious.
Yeah, maybe we can get coverage to clean that up a little bit here. Basically, the impending dice are on it, which don't really matter, and we have 2, which going down to 1, and there's the 5 dice because it is sort of there. We go. It is a 5/5. Lots of different ways to do that. At home, personally, I just pull my guy out of the sleeve a little bit. I'm like, hey, it's been Zerd because it never
Yeah,
goes away and never regains its power. The impending don't matter a ton.
too many
Um,
dice. Oh god, what's
yeah.
going on? Now I'm confused. It's got two. Okay, two
Yeah, so the
impending
black
counters.
dice is the stun, the white is the impending, and green is just representing power
Ooh.
toughness here. And speaking of power toughness, we have a lot of it in hand with Herd Migration as a card that Grayson could deploy this turn. Hoey only with a fountain poured up and a couple cards in hand, we might just see the whole herd come down. As here it comes,
Ooh,
5
baby.
3/3s on the battlefield. You saw Hoey deploy this Kaito, hoping it'd run away with the game, tap down this Overlord of the Hauntwood so that Grayson couldn't stabilize, but it's in a really bad place now.
Yeah, Kaido really good against your opponent deploying 1 creature at a time, but when they make 5 creatures, it's a little bit harder to stun all 5 of those 3/3s. So Grayson kind of with the perfect follow up to that Kaido, as we see the Overlord. Eventually, it will lose some of these dice. And yeah, Matthew really in a tough spot because doesn't really have a clean way to answer these. Bunch of kill spells, anoint with affliction, go for the throat, but doesn't really have anything like a Maelstrom Pulse or any sort of way to clean up these tokens. And at 15 life, it's just going to be really hard for Matthew to race this
Loves this. It looks like he just
quintuple block.
yeah,
Just
he's
send
just
it.
gonna block with everything. It's just like, yeah, I don't want to get guy. I don't need to double, and then maybe something weird happens. Let's block with the whole team. And Hoey does get in for 2 with the Fairy Mastermind and has 2 more in hand with a Flood Pit Drowner. So can sort of tap down a little bit and sort of get into a bit of a racing situation. But the biggest problem here, Devin, is we have the 2 colorless lands in our deck. The only ones we drew them both, and we only have 1 blue source. So we only have
Mm,
1
that's
spell a
tough.
turn here. So this could be a very close race, and still might be if something like Kaido comes off the top. But we'll have to see how it goes here.
Yeah, and the other unfortunate part for Matthew was he drew a cut down and not a go for the throat. So if that was
Mm-hmm.
go for the throat, you could like tap down one with the drowner, go for the throat, another one, take 6. But yeah, just everything kind of everything is the worst possible scenario here for Matthew. Just can only play 1 spell, as you mentioned, and with Grayson at 11, doesn't really have the ability to race all of these 3/3s. You see a shake of the head here for Matthew, and even if a Kaido comes off the top, yeah, you attack with hit for 5, but that's not even close to enough, and that is going to be Grayson taking down game number 1.
Yep. And Hoey there sort of just got a little bit unlucky with the mana and sort of, had the Zur draw happen to them. But that's sort of why you played the Zur deck, right? It has this ability to play this controlling game. It has this ability to go way over the top and has these sort of fast kills that it can get if it gets, sort of Green Overlord into Zur. Let's check out the sideboard seer and see what Hoey has available to fight over this deck. We have 2 Duress, 2 Ghost Vacuum, 2 Negate, 2 Tashaya's Tidebinder, Anoint the Affliction, Blot Out, Disdainful Stroke, Fey Bloom Trick, Gix Command, Go for the Throat, and Shieldred the Apocalypse. Devin, what do you like and why?
So there is a good amount of non-creature spells here for Grayson. Up the Beanstalk, Sunfall, Leyline Binding. So Duresses and Negates, those you probably want to go towards. Negate lines up a little bit awkwardly because it doesn't counter any of the Overlord impendings, even though they're not creatures in the battlefield. So keep that in mind. You mentioned Tishana's Tidebinder when we were discussing before the match. That one is quite good, being able to stop. It's particularly good against Zur because you not only counter the Zur trigger, the Zur activation, but you also make Zur into a 1/4 vanilla. Um, Something like Blot Out you can maybe go towards, where you let Grayson activate the Zur and then make Grayson sacrifice the big Overlord. You do something like Feybloom Trick, which is an instant that's reasonable, that lines up well against Sunfall, is just something to hold up post Sunfall, and the Shieldred as well. Grayson does draw quite a bit of extra cards.
Awesome. Well, let's check out what Grayson has in his sideboard for this Dimir matchup. As we have 3 Authority of the Consuls, 3 Elspeth Smite, 3 Paw Patch Formation, 2 Doppelgang, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Vivian Reed.
So personally, I am a pretty big fan of Elspeth Smite against Dimir, especially because these Dimir decks are a lot more focused around Kaido, and being able to smite their, like, if they have one attacker on turn 3 and they clearly have 3 mana they're representing a Kaido, you can smite the creature before blocks to make it so they can't set up the Kaido that turn. So I think Grayson's going to want to go towards these smites. Paw Patch is interesting, where yes, there are a bunch of flyers in the blue black deck, but in terms of mana efficiency, it doesn't line up super well, where, there's no Archfiends or any 4 or 5 mana flyers. It's mostly just 2 drops. So I don't know if Grayson wants to go towards those. And sort of same thing with Vivian Reed. I just don't think that's kind of the exchange you want to be making against Dimir. In my experience, you just want to kind of be lowering the curve as much as possible and interacting with their cheap creatures as early as often as you can.
Yeah, and you see here from Grayson, we also have some spicy ones in our deck, like Thalia and the Gitrog monster, where some players are playing extra copies of Analyze the Pollen to sort of be more copies of our Overlords and our Zers. We just have a kind of another grindy mid-rangey card. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out and exactly how these players want to sideboard. But they are shuffling up and getting ready in our feature match area. So really quickly here, let's show the price pool of what these players are playing for as they get a couple good last shuffles in, as there's a lot on the line. We're not going to break it all down for you here, but what really matters here is first place, $10,000 plus Pro Tour invite, plus an invite back to next year's champs. That's a lot on the line. And we want to also give a shout out to our sponsor, Ultimate Guard, for coverage this weekend as well. Thank you, Ultimate Guard, for helping make this paper magic happen. We love paper magic, and we're glad that you can help us bring it all to everyone at home. So you're going to bring it on. Let's bring it on down to the feature match area to see these players as they've resolved. They looks like they both kept 7s, and we see a Gloomvage and a Path and a Meticulous Archive and a Surveil and a Keep on Top. Grayson never bends. Might as well just play a tap land.
I know, what's the point? Just what's the Tranquil Cove, I think, is the ETB tapped one, as we see a mismatched archive here. Bin's a smite, and I did see a smite in Grayson's hand. So it's interesting here for Matthew. It's funny where you see the smite in the graveyard, and you kind of assume that maybe that means that Grayson already has one, or maybe he's digging for lands. Now, Matthew doesn't really have the luxury of playing around it. But yeah, this is kind of exactly what you want the smite for. You want to make sure you can kill the creature before your opponent gets to put that Kaido into play.
Yep. And we're going to see Hoey follow up with a Spyglass Siren, the little 1-drop, Thraben Inspector Air, as it were, brings a little piece along with it, a map in this case. Still is a Fairy Mastermind up in case something like how the Beanstalk comes down here. But Grayson sort of showing one of the awkward parts of this deck. Your mana is not good. As we see a blue-white Verge come down, Fairy Mastermind here. Now, this deck does try to build itself to be much more, a green-white deck splashing the other colors. And with the Green Overlord, like Song Game 1, it's not a huge issue. But it's coming up this game.
Grayson's hand is just, I think it was Overlord, the 2 green Overlords, and a Vivian Reed with no green sources in sight. So this one might be a quick runaway here. And that's the 3rd copy of Smite. I think it is.
Yeah, it is. And that Grayson had access to them all, but Kaito still, comes on in and gets exchanged there.
Yeah, so I mean, look, Smite took care of the first creature and bought sort of Grayson a turn, but Matthew with the double creature follow up is is still able to deploy that Kaido, and that is going to be just an absolute menace. I don't know if we can get Kaido up on the screen for people who have not seen it yet, but this card is absolutely fantastic. It just kind of does everything, where it is it's a creature. It's hard to interact with on your turn because the turns that it's a creature, it also has hexproof. It stuns creatures for a couple of turns. It draws you cards. It can also grow itself. It just kind of does everything, and really the backbone behind these Dimir decks.
Yep, sort of a huge reason to be Dimir, along with other factors, but we're going to see a green-white Surveyor land here for Grayson, and we're going to Leyline Binding down that Kaito, Bane of Nightmares, get it off the battlefield. And that's one of the things about these Dimir decks is they play a lot of cards to enable cards like Kaito, like Enduring Curiosity. And if you can fight over those cards and keep them off the battlefield, the deck's still good, but loses a lot of punch here. So you've seen Grayson really prioritize that, even though something like Curiosity could come down here once they remove the Kaito. And it looks like we are surveilling, and we've got a sideboard card, it looks like to me, like potentially a blot out here.
Yeah, what's that card on top, Mason? I was going to ask you.
That's actually the go for the third. Excuse me. It looks a bit like
Warhammer, right? The Warhammer.
Yes, the Warhammer one.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there's also a very interesting moment for Matthew here of, do I want land? Do I want to dig, or do I want the counter? Because Matthew could have left it on top and then bend it the second time just to push that extra damage. Decides to kind of move to the deck, look for maybe some more important cards, but kind of a cool point of interest to think about when you're using your map tokens. As we're going to pass back to Grayson here, and I think we just drew Cavern of Souls, which means we could deploy one of these Overlords finally.
Yeah, so normally you'd want to play them for 3, but with 5 mana, might as well just run it out there as the 5 mana creature. Going to go ahead and get it everywhere, and I think I saw there was a Vivian as well, so that's going to be available to Grayson next turn. Flood Pit's going to tap that for a couple of turns. Now Grayson on 15, Matthew having 4 power in play plus the Reef, so you could animate the Reef, hit for 8, and that could put Grayson on a 2-turn clock. We'll see if Hoey wants to go about doing that, because I think I got a good glimpse of Hoey's hand. I think it might just be all lands. Plus, there's a blue card that he drew this turn. I think that might be a negate.
It is negate, yeah. So he's on straight lands negate.
So it's interesting here. Do you want to use the Reef to put Grayson on a 2-turn clock and go shields down and negate, or do you want to just slow the clock a little bit and hold up negate? And I guess the question you have to ask yourself is, what are you negating this turn? Because you might actually be okay with Grayson slamming a Sunfall because it exiles his own Overlord. But it looks like Hoey is going to decide to hold up negate. I like that too, because you can Fountain Port as well. So you can just, negate plus make a fish token.
Yeah, and this turn you can activate your Flood Pit Drowner and get rid of that Overlord.
That too, yep.
So now you have to negate up. So, obviously something like Herd Migration that dominated us in game number 1, we have that answered. And like you were just saying there, Devin, the Fountain Port will let us have a mana sink here. So, hey, 1 life and 4 mana for a 1/1 isn't the greatest deal ever, but you kind of get it on the house here while you hold up your negate, as Hoey smiles as he's like, I'm not out of the woods yet.
Yeah, tricky game to navigate. And we'll see what Grayson wants to do as well, because, we do know he has access to that Vivian read. It looks like there's a Zur, and a Get Lost has been picked up as well. So those are 3 of the cards in Grace's hand. And I think the 4th might be, if it's a white card, it might be a Binding or a Sunfall.
Yeah, I mean, really the huge thing here is for Hoey, the Zur is going to probably come down, activate on that Binding, and it's going to be big trouble if Grayson wants to sort of go that route. Decides to maybe make the game about the Vivian read first, wants to maybe remove the 1 threat in the way. Hoey's going to take a second to think, do I want to negate this? Now, we know Hoey's almost assuredly going to negate it, but he has to think about, there are other cards that could come down that are bigger worries, and decides, you know what, I've got to fight this fight. Also bluffs a little bit, maybe having some choices, right? Maybe I have something like a Spell Stutter or a Phantom Interference.
I'm actually a little surprised there that Grayson just didn't decide to go for the Zur, because with face-up deck list, Grayson knows that the only counter spells that Matthew has access to are Spell Stutter, which you can pay for, and then Disdainful Stroke Negate, neither of which hits Zur. So,
The
Grayson
Tidebinder does.
That's true. Tidebinder, okay. So maybe baiting out a Tidebinder.
Yeah, and if you play that there, Tidebinder isn't the greatest, but it would stop the minus on these Siren and then put you in a spot. We're going to see a milling of 4, 2 Overlords, a Zur, and a land. And Grayson's going to take 6 there. And sort of on the back foot here, Hoey has 2 mana up. Cavern of Souls is the draw. That definitely helps with any sort of worries about counter spells. No mana up for Tidebinder. Grayson has to know the coast is basically clear. Almost assuredly naming Wizard, as Zur is a wizard.
Right. So now for Grayson, you can go Zur, activate, gain 6, go to 11. And then think also, because you have 4 mana, so you can actually go animate the binding attack and then still hold up the get losses. And we're getting a word from coverage. It looks like human was named. I believe Zur is also a human.
Zur is a human wizard and the only human in the deck. So looks like Grayson didn't want to attack. Interesting.
No attacks.
Here. Yeah, he could have animated the binding and also has, in response, animate again. So maybe
that's surprising, because I don't know if you'd want to trade the binding for the Reef, because then Hoey would get back the Kaido.
Yeah, I think maybe Grayson might be trying to trick Hoey into going for this, because Grayson has the Get Lost. So you can, before blocks, Get Lost this Reef. And depending on like how Hoey responds, you either animate because you have to. You can also animate and jump with the Zur and theoretically behind the binding. And it looks like that's what he was doing.
Yeah, so basically Grayson knew that he didn't want to make the trade of binding for Reef, and Hoey also Grayson can probably assume that Hoey knows that Grayson ideally doesn't want to make that trade. So if Hoey is more incentivized to go for the Reef because he doesn't want to make that trade, then that kind of makes the get lost a little bit better for Grayson. So yeah, pretty heads up play there. And Hoey does have the second Reef, which makes things a little bit awkward here for Grayson. And leftovers of Fairy Mastermind as well.
Yep, we're going to activate that Leyline Binding here at the end of the turn. It's the 6/6 now. Lifelink and Death Touch and Hexproof, all thanks to Zur. Kind of wish we had done that after the get lost, so we couldn't get Tidebinder potentially. But hey, that's life.
Yeah. So you were saying that when you play with Zur in paper, you take the card halfway out of the sleeve to represent this.
Yeah. I do it like old Glorybringer kind of. If you played back then, you're exerting it.
Yeah.
Just because it's so much easier personally. But everyone does what bets for them. And we're gonna see a Fairy Mastermind come down in a turn here. And Hoey had Grayson on death's doorstep, Devin, but now has drawn too many lands in a row as another one off the top and is falling behind. Now, Fairy Mastermind does give you a lot of card draw, but it's a tough spot to be.
I mean, the other sick thing about the Zur is that not only does it provide you this, outrageously large lifelink death touch body, it also is a 1/4 flyer, and it just happens to, line up perfectly against Hoey's battlefield as well. And now we see more huge lifelink hexproof death touch creatures coming into the battlefield. This is going to be really tough for Hoey to come back from.
Yep. And you're seeing Hoey wait. He has the Restless Reef, which he can animate to block the Leyline Binding, which would be great for him as he get that Kaido back and that threat off the board. But also has Fountain Port and Fairy Mastermind. So can either activate the port or potentially use the Mastermind. I'm going to use the Fountain Port to draw a card via sacrificing the map. Still could activate Mastermind. Would draw 2 cards here as Grayson has drawn for turn. And yeah, when you're floating out in spots like this, sometimes you just have to take that risk. As Spell Stutter and Kaido, Bane of Nightmares were drawn. Those are good ones.
Kaido down the Zur, that only gets in for 4 damage. You can't Kaido either the Binding or the Overlord because both of those have Hexproof. I think Hoey really needs to find some way to kill this Zur. Right? If you start off by killing the Zur, then you can interact with the enchantment creatures as you see fit. But until the Zur leaves the battlefield, the Hexproof is just going to be really hard for Hoey to kind of do anything. 2 counterspells and a Kaido. Those counterspells maybe would have been, I guess they probably wouldn't have been good enough earlier because, Grayson just has 2 caverns as well.
Yep. Disdainful Stroke in hand here for Hoey. He can still answer stuff like Leyline Binding and Sunfall, but that's about it. Decides to leave up the ability to activate things like Fairy Mastermind, like the Restless Reef. We're going to see a green Overlord come on in here, the Haunt Woods, making another land for Grayson.
Does give Hoey the opportunity to trade if Hoey so chooses. Maybe Grayson's fine with that, because then if Hoey trades the Reef for the Overlord, maybe that unlocks the Leyline Binding to start attacking. We saw Grayson not attack with the Binding the past couple of turns. Likely doesn't want to trade. Is that 2 Reefs for Hoey? Yep. I think there's 2. Okay.
2 Reefs. Yeah. Hoey drew a lot of lands this game, but 3 of them were Reefs, so could have been worse. So we are going to see Reef. It looks like he's siding up, do I really want to do this or do I want to draw a bunch of cards this turn? Makes sense too for Grayson, right? Like you're mentioning, the Binding's too risky to throw away, but also if we just sit here, Hoey's drawing like 3 cards, with all his mana. I'm not really getting much of it except a single card. I've got to try and close the door on this game, as the Zur deck can play a controlling role, but also can, play this sort of aggressive-y, combo-y beatdown plan of just, hey, really quickly do a bunch of damage and kill you.
So it looks like trade is going to happen. Again, Hoey leftovers, 2 counterspells and a Kaido. Looks like I think Grayson's working with 2 Sunfalls and something else. I couldn't quite get a good look at what the last card is. And I mean, it's a situation here. It's like, we've been talking about the past couple of turns. How does Hoey get back in this game? As we see another counterspell picked up, it's definitely not with that. I think it really all starts with finding a kill spell for this Zur, because the longer this Zur stays in play, Hoey's cards just don't really work.
Yeah, and we're seeing Hoey, slowly develop more and more flyers, has, the ability to keep using this mana as he jokes about there, like, wow, powerful. And we're at a standstill. Yeah, Grayson's drawing a lot of lands here. Has a swamp, has a forest, has a Sunfall in hand. Gonna play that forest and just pass the turn. And Hoey, gets to activate the Fountain Port, draw a card, figure out does he want to use the Fairy Mastermind to draw another card afterwards. If he draws it during Curiosity, could play that as a thing.
Oh
Takes a
god,
second.
Mason, is that a whiteboard Underground River?
I think it is.
Oh no.
We play with what we can around here.
We won't talk about that.
8 players playing Dimir mid-range. It's hard to borrow the good ones, let's just say.
That is true.
And
look,
notably,
all I'm saying is there's got to be 4 Ice Age Underground Rivers among all 8 competitors playing Dimir mid-range. There has to be
potentially. Maybe that's Hoey's first card. Who knows? He's been playing for a long time. Also, big note there, Devin. Hoey said, I feel kind of good about it. Like, I don't want to give you a card right now. I could draw 2 here in exchange for you getting 1, but I'm feeling like things are getting close. As we see the double Spyglass Siren, obviously the Kaido's coming in on the other one.
Okay. So now that you have the Kaido in play, does this give you an opportunity? So the other Siren's going to die. Does this give you an opportunity to start making inroads in the battlefield? You can, like, maybe... I mean, I assume Matthew just wants to draw a card. Yes, we're going to Surveil 2. Ooh, I think I saw a Shieldred there.
Yeah, I think we had a Shieldred and a Go for the Throat, and we kept the Throat, which makes sense. You maybe don't want to play into like a Sunfall right now, and then you can just go for the Throat, the Zur down, next turn, tap down the Binding, or second kill spell if you find one, and then Shieldred to kind of finish the game off here. As another Leyline Binding in hand from Grayson, we might see that come down.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest with you. I thought Grayson was going to run away with this game, but the patience from Matthew here is just shown very, very well. Really just kind of taking his time, getting a couple of cards here and there, and then once he found that spot to find the kill spell, now it's kind of all going to crumble here for Grayson. Now this Binding is interesting. Probably want to fight over this as the Stroke is going to be cast.
Yep, getting a chance to convert that into a real card. Grayson does have a Surveil land in hand. Can use that to try to hopefully not draw any more lands off the tizzy, as the kids say. The kids are saying it, by the way. I know some people.
I don't know if the kids say that.
I feel like, why would I say it if they don't say it? You know what I mean? Like, it makes you think.
Sure.
As we're going to see a Leyline Binding attack, I think it is going after the Kaido here.
So now Hoey can probably just go kill the Zur, chump the Binding. You could also just make a fish and chump the Binding and just let Grayson have the 6 life.
Yeah, I kind of like letting Grayson have the 6 life because from Hoey's perspective, there's a lot of like spells in hand from Grayson, right? Like Grayson wasn't playing lands for a couple of those turns. Like maybe he can think one's a bluff, but he's like, I don't want to let you, do something with the Zur. I'll wait until I'm kind of ready. Because he does have double spell stutter, which, if it was a card like, what's it called? Herd Migration, you could use the 2 to cancel that out. And you're seeing Hoey think about it.
Yeah, so now Hoey has the option to Fountain Port here. A couple of options. You can go for the Throat with a counterspell up. You can Fountain Port. You can also do nothing, which Hoey looks like maybe we're letting that up. Potentially just wants to make sure he has counterspells at all times available, which does make sense. Picked up a Curiosity. So now we go... Ooh,
this is so much a sign of strength. I love this here. Like you just said, we didn't do anything. That's strength. We're gonna make ourselves a Kaito ninja emblem, and we're getting the beatdowns on Devin. Who cares that this Leyline Binding gains 6 life? My Kaito's never leaving the battlefield, and it's gonna hit you a bunch this game.
Yeah, we did keep go for the throw, right? I wasn't imagining that. We did. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. It's potentially possible that we missaw it here, but that would be the thing that makes the most sense. And during Curiosity was definitely the draw for turn, though.
Yes. So now you could even go for the Throat the Zur, cast the Curiosity, and still, I think, have double counterspell up. And Matthew is playing this incredibly patiently. I don't know if I would have taken this patient of a line, but he feels very safe here, and for good reason. His hand is pretty good.
Yeah, I actually really like this from Hoey. It's a little on the risky side because Grayson does have some good top decks, but the other thing to look at is Grayson only has like those 10 to 12, and we drew one of them, Overlord and Mistmores. But, it's not game over. Like, we do think we got that go for the third in the hand. Hoey is just like, hey, I don't need to take any risks. I think I can beat you. And this is the thing that does happen with the Dimir deck is like, if it can stabilize against Zur and Zur draws, one too many lands, you can run away with the game. We saw Mae French mention how she thinks she brought the best deck of, to the format here, and that was Dimir. Let's see if Hoey can maybe prove her right. As Enduring Curiosity can also get in and just double block this ley line and then clear that up. Now you'll get a Kaito that you maybe don't even really want, but
Yeah, how are we thinking about that? Still thinking about maybe go for the throning the Zur here. You could also just go Curiosity Chump Block to keep the enchantment in play, protect it against Sunfall. Because yeah, getting back that Kaido is kind of awkward here.
yeah, I think I kind of like either Curiosity Chump Block or like no
Jump with
block, trying
Siren,
to.
maybe.
Yeah, you can maybe do that. Maybe even make a fish or something. Like trade a life and 3 mana or 4, excuse me, for the Fountain Port itself. But I think there's a lot of different ways to play this here. And Hoey also probably is thinking about, like, what makes sense to be in Grayson's hand, right? He hasn't done anything. The card Sunfall is the one that makes total sense, right? That could be why Hoey's not activating his Go for the Throats, using his Go for the Throats, because he doesn't want to make Grayson feel better about using Sunfall.
All right, so trade's going to happen here. That's going to bring a Kaido back. Kaido's going to go to the graveyard. And now Matthew is in a spot where we've sort of answered everything. Still has Disdainful Stroke up in case there's a Sunfall. But, the bad news for Hoey here is we see that's the top deck here for Grayson. And now this is kind of brutal because can't counter it, which is the Cavern. Can't really target it because, again, you have to kill the Zur first. So this one's going to be tough for Hoey to slog through.
It's also really interesting too because Grayson didn't impending it and then activate on it, right? He's playing around the kill spell because you could have played it for 4, right? And then activate on it, make it 7, which is one bigger, not huge.
But then Hoey could respond and go for the throw.
Exactly. So great play here from Grayson. You could be addicted to value, but he's like, wait, I just need to make sure I've got this thing in play. Here's that Go for the throat. Zur can still react now and turn it into a 7/7. So that's going to give us that extra +1/+1. Great play there from Grayson. Knows that, I could play around having like more mana up or whatever and represent things. No reason to get got by that though, as it passes over to Hoey.
Man, and that lifelink too. Hoey did have a couple of opportunities to kill the Zur. I think there might have been 1 or 2 attacks from that binding that that got in that 6 life. And if Grayson was at a little bit lower than 22, you could say Kaido down the Overlord. I guess the 2/1 moths are a little bit to fight through too, because your creatures aren't super well at attacking through them. The emblem does allow Matt to attack into the 2/2/1s because double block would mean the Kaido's currently a 4/5, so can't really line up a double block here with the 2 moths. So this is a heads up play here from Matthew, leaving back the Fairy Mastermind. But yeah, this is going to be really interesting to see how this plays out because we've also traded all those reefs away. Those reefs are kind of what were allowing us to have some sort of a semblance of a clock before, but because we traded all 3 of those away, now we don't have those in play anymore.
Yeah. We also have the 2 spell stutters and another Fairy Mastermind in hand, Devin. So cards like Sunfall, despite having a million mana for Grayson, I think are dangerously close to being countered because it costs 5 and then it would be 8 if Hoey did both of them, assuming you don't have a kill spell for a Mastermind. But just something to potentially keep in mind there, as the Enduring Curiosity is going to come down. That's going to get some draws here, and we're seeing the patience from Hoey really paying off.
So spell stutter is counter unless you pay 2 + 1 for each other fairy, right?
Yes.
So 1 fairy in play, which means double stutter would make the Sunfall cost 11.
Yep, and we have another one in hand, so we have another Mastermind. So you can maybe even get Grayson to pay
Mastermind double stutter.
Yeah, exactly.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, great. I think Grayson has 12 mana.
Yep. And Grayson trying to figure out how am I going to get out of this.
I gotta say, this game has been wild, Mason. We had, early on, Grayson looked like he was going to run away with it with the early Zur, the binding on the Kaido, set up a good spot for Zur plus binding, and Matt's just kind of been chugging away over here. Really, whittling down Grayson's battlefield. Took a couple of efficient trades or profitable trades with the Restless Reefs, and now we've kind of gotten to this weird point in the game where the Zur's no longer in play. Grayson doesn't have a ton of threats left over, and Matt's just kind of chilling. I think Grayson's lining up the Sunfall. It's not going to work out for him.
Yeah, I mean, it will resolve now, right? Because the Fairy Mastermind is gone.
Oh, the Mastermind traded. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but it is awkward. I mean, we're trading Curiosity and the Spyglass Siren for the Moth and the Overlord. you got to do what you got to do. But the Kaido stays around. It's a Planeswalker right now. So definitely a spot where Grayson is in an awkward position moving forward.
Now, is it possible that this incubator races the Kaido? Presumably not, because I think Hoey has another Mastermind. Yeah, so you go Mastermind end of turn, untap, you can go... well, yeah, so the Kaido can actually make an emblem, and then it'll be a 5/6. So 5/6/7 gets Grayson down to 10. Can play the Spyglass Siren, which was in hand, I believe. So that could maybe change the math a little bit. I think
And
the
the
race
found
is
port
looking pretty
fish.
good for Hoey. Yeah, the fish too.
Yep, double land here with the Duress Cavern Island. But yeah, I think you're right. I think the race favors Hoey, however he wants to use his Kaito, can tick up to shorten the clock a little. Also can just wait to connect and draw some more cards. And remember this game too, Devin? This is a game where Hoey drew like 6 lands in a row during the most important stage of the developing turns and still navigated this. And you can see why players would play a deck like this Dimir and be our most popular deck with the capability to play these kind of games.
Yeah, this game has been absolutely wild. We're just like this. It feels like this game has sort of been happening in different stages where you had like stage 1, Matthew had a little bit of early pressure. Stage 2, Grayson kind of set up the Zur Overlord, or the, excuse me, the Zur binding, big attacks there. Then there was like trading with Restless Reef. There's just been so much going on this game, and it's been fascinating to watch. And I believe that's the 4th copy of Restless Reef.
I do believe it's the 4th. And also, I'm a little curious on what deck sizes are like, specifically for Hoey. We've drawn so many cards. We've got to get into that 20 spot, maybe a little lower. I doubt this game comes to decking, but it is funny just to think about how many cards Hoey's drawn.
Yeah, I think. Well, there were. I think. I think Hoey got in 2. I can't remember if it was this game or last game, but there were 2 reef attacks that happened, and those 8 cards, you never know, it could matter.
Yep. And Grayson attacks the Kaito. Spyglass Siren chumps, and yeah, we have herd migration with I think 6 mana left over. So
7.
Enough to pay.
Yeah. So yeah, is that 6? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it looks like there's 6.
Yeah, it looked like an everywhere and 2 copies of that, and then 3 Surveilling lands. The first 3 we had. Remember, our mana was really awkward at the start of this game. We went blue, white land, blue, white land, blue, white land.
Yeah. It's crazy to think that's how this game started. So let's see. So Hoey can go. What if you just tap out Grayson? Can you? No, you definitely can't win through the 5 blockers. I think Hoey looked like he sacked a map to Fountain Port to try and find a hard counter. Did not find it. So what do we line it up here?
Looks like we have a blot out to kill the 4/4, which is awkward, right? You see Hoey thinking about it. It's like, the 4/4 kind of matters because I'm getting attacked a bunch, and if I don't do it now, it's going to kill a 3/3. But if you draw an Overlord, it's pretty bad for me. But he is going to just exchange the blot out to, remove the 4/4 before they'll all be equal mana values. And passing the turn back to himself.
5 3/3s. Hoey did beat the 5, or no, Hoey did not beat the 5 3/3s in game 1, rather. So the opposite. Hoey lost to the 5 3/3s in game 1. So we're going to try and see if Hoey can change that fate this time, and doesn't really have a good attack with Kaido here. The Mastermind can go ahead and put Grayson down to 9, but yeah, those spell stutters not doing a ton here. Okay, we're surveilling. Let's take a peek.
Found a Tidebinder.
It's not bad, but I feel like it's a little too late.
Yeah, it's an awkward one, right? Like if another Overlord comes down, you're going to really want it. Or another Zur if the game goes really long. But these turns, it's not really what's up. And I think I was trying to figure out, like, okay, I activate my Fountain Port. I go to 13. I make a fish. I chump. I go to 1. Okay. My Kaido is going to attack for 4 here. Put Grayson to 7. Can I, like, sneak across lethal? And it looks like Hoey...
the same block as game 1.
Yeah.
Love it.
Going to kill the Kaito, and this is maybe it was actually what Hoey was wanting, because now Hoey's not getting cracked back for lethal, right? Yeah. Obviously the fish would get in the way, but any sort of kill spell on the fish there, as it looks like Hoey's hand is just lands and counter spells.
There's still a reef too, right? So the reef can check one of the beast tokens.
No, the reef. Oh no, there it is. Excuse me. I thought I had
got one reef left.
Excuse me. Yeah, so that does matter.
It's been a long game, but yeah, we got one reef left, so we can go reef plus fish. You don't even need to block at this point. You just go to 2, I guess. and then the fish puts you to 1, and then you have that's 7 damage. What fish? Yeah, fish, reef plus mastermind is 7, but Grayson at 9. It's a really tricky spot here. What did we draw, Grayson? Drew. Okay. Random overlord here. So that, I mean, it blocks the restless reef, which is important for Grayson.
I'm not sure why we're playing it right now. I feel like I'm missing something. Maybe Grayson isn't going to attack. Feels like the attack's good. Put Hoey down to 5. You have a 6/5 and a bunch of 3/3s.
You send everything. Hoey blocks 1. Yeah. And then you still have a block. You don't even need a blocker, yeah, because the Hoey only can produce 7 damage here. So it looks like we're gonna go with Mastermind in response. Maybe trying to find some sort of counterspell or a kill spell. That's fine. Go for the throat. I guess the counterspell is no good because of the cavern. So now,
I think this is the end of the turn.
okay, Grayson no attacks.
Yeah, I think Grayson was just trying to hold back. Didn't want to get maybe counterattacked by like a reef and enduring curiosity. As the Fountain Port's going to make a fish.
Yeah, so Hoey really wants to try and find some flyers here. Presumably, Drowner is not bad. That does tap down one of the beast tokens. So now you got Grayson falling to 7. You can Drowner to tap 1. Yeah, it's like another question is, does Grayson even want to attack here? Now that you're at 7, the attack gets a little bit more awkward because now you actually are facing lethal damage down because of that Restless Reef. So now Grayson probably can't even attack. I wonder if he was supposed to attack last turn.
Yeah, I think this is a classic spot where so often in Magic, when you look back on your games, you should have attacked 1 turn sooner than you did. And I think this is that spot as Hoey's pulling away with it. It makes sense though, right? Grayson was worried about, I mean, during Curiosity, there's a card that often is a 4 of in this deck, and Hoey's seen 1 and drawn, over this deck. We see it get picked up right now. That would have been a potentially very punishing play as it comes down here now for Hoey. And you're seeing Hoey start to pick up the pace a little. He knows he's kind of stalling the game out with the flyers and can win this.
There's just so many flash threats too, right? There's Mastermind, Curiosity, Flood Pits, Drowner. Hoey could have any number of those. And if you make the attack that 1 turn before and Hoey has any of those cards, then you do end up facing down lethal damage. So yeah, tricky spot here for Grayson, but it looks like Hoey is going to take this one. This has been a marathon affair. And the other thing that we have to think about, Mason, is time for game 3. I don't know exactly how much time there is. Maybe we can get a call from production, but I can't imagine there's a lot left.
Yeah, I don't know. And the Curiosity attack there, I love that. It trades off the 3/3. The way you die is you get attacked back. So might as well, force Grayson to trade. Grayson does go with a quadruple block. We're going to see a Mockingbird copying this Fairy Mastermind. That makes cards like Up the Beanstalk a lot worse. Could also copy the Beast in order to have lethal. Might be a sign that Hoey has a flash flyer in hand. 18 minutes still in this round, so plenty of time. I think game 1 was just like a 4-minute game, Yeah. So we had a very close one here. As the green overlord's coming down, you see Hoey sort of like, sure, I bend my Tidebinder. I knew this could happen. It's all right. It's not the white one.
So do we have lethal? We have Curiosity plus Flood Pits, tap 1 blocker, plus Fish. I think you have enough to do all of that. So yeah, Curiosity, Flood Pits, Fish. You tap 1 blocker. There's 3 blockers remaining for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 attackers. So you block the Curiosity, the Flood Pits, and the Reef, and I believe that's still 5 coming through.
Yeah, I think so too. Now you might not want to do that just because it's something like Leyline Binding stopping it, but if Hoey draws, maybe like an extra kill spell, we'll probably see the attack come through as Grayson only has 1 card in hand. Hoey's someone who's not going to miss lethal. Loves to play Rhinos back in the MH2 metagame. Definitely was someone that can beat down and play these kind of tempo-y decks. Looks like Matthew Hoey. It's got to go for the throat.
I found it go for the throat too. So now you even have lethal through a kill spell, I believe.
Yeah, and he is lethal without even animating the land. So we're going to move on to game number 3 here. Wow, what a marathon affair! Like you were saying there, Devin. That was an unreal game. That was amazing to watch.
That was really fun to watch. And just the progression of all of those games, just to watch and see like the different stages of when, it felt like Grayson was winning for a while, had that Zur attack. Hoey was so patient that game with waiting as long as possible to kill the Zur with the go for the throat. Just a phenomenal game to go back and watch.
I can't wait to watch it again in the future. But while we're waiting for this game number 3 to start up here, let's check out the player sides real quick and see a little bit about our competitors today. Matthew Hoey, like we talked about, someone who, if you've been watching the RG series for a while, you know this face, been around since the first champs, only missing one. 2024 year, though, we only played 2 main events, but that's okay because we won one of them, and we had the one top 8 there as well. And, has lots of magic accomplishments outside of this. 13 SCG Open top 8s from back in the day, and a Grand Prix finalist, and a peddler of fine cardboard. I wonder what that could mean. I know where I find all my fine cardboard is Nerd Rage Gaming and their great championship series. But let's check out our other competitor with their slide here, Grayson Nemets. And we have 11 main events played with 1 win and number of top 8s 2. A non-series accomplishments, 2023 RC Atlanta top 32. I believe that qualifies you for the Pro Tour, so congratulations there. We're a PhD student. So pretty soon we're going to be talking about Dr. Grayson in the feature match area.
Yeah, and Grayson ended up taking down the modern event with the Mono Blue Belcher deck, and yeah, that was a very fun event to watch. So, yeah, like we'll have to see how this plays out in Game 3. Just a very very interesting game where like Hoey had the spell stutters, didn't really get a ton of value out of those. As far as sideboarding is concerned, there's what's interesting to note is Grayson saw a lot of cards that game, and there were no copies of Up the Beanstalk. Now, with the presence of Fairy Mastermind, is there ever a consideration where you would board something like Up the Beanstalk out? There might be.
I'll say this, on the draw, it at least makes more sense to me, right? On the play, I'm a little harder because even though it has to be turn 2, you can sometimes sneak it under a Mastermind. I think I would be hard pressed to remove it totally. But yeah, on the draw, that would be the time where it at least makes the most sense to me, right? It's like, okay, this is going to maybe line up a little poorly. They don't have this transformational sideboard type thing. And so maybe Grayson has a plan like that. But, I would be hard pressed to completely cut my beans.
That's fair. Yeah, just the game goes too long. You have enough answers to Fairy Mastermind. You can feel like you can probably and eventually just take care of them. And looks like Hoey's on a mold the 6. I think I saw a Siren, a Go for the Throat, and Kaito. Yeah, looks like Kaito. So pretty good hand here for Hoey. Although Mana's a little awkward. We have turn 1 Siren, and then I believe the other 2 lands we have are Restless Reef and Foundport, which does not provide us with black. Well, we can just go Reef on 2, and then yeah, that's fine. Picked up a Verge too.
Yep, Verge coming down, attack for 1. Speaking of Verge, Grayson also played 1. Has the ability to cast the Green Overlord with this Cavern of Souls here. Overload the Hauntwood's coming down. That's an everywhere token. As we're setting up that very powerful turn 4 play Zur, activate Zur line for Grayson with the Zur in hand, Devin. So we're going to have to see how we're going to want to play it here. As I imagine Kaito is going to probably be coming in. Bane of Nightmares.
Yeah, and this is both players firing on all cylinders, right? These are the best draws that these players can have. I guess Grayson didn't have the turn 2 Beanstalk, but it'll be interesting to see who comes out ahead if this turn 3 Kaito versus the turn 4 Zur activate the Overlord. Presumably, Matthew Hoey does have the ability to chump block the Overlord to protect the Zur for a turn, if he does so choose so, which presumably does. Blotout picked up here, which can take care of. Blotout is highest mana value, right?
Correct. Yes, that will get the Overlord. Yeah. Of note here too, Bend the Curiosity. Hoey feels pretty good about what's going on in the hand. As we're going to see the Green Overlord come in. That's going to make an everywhere token from the attack trigger. Zur, the Eternal Schemer. And you played against this deck, you know how different it is when they have this card on turn 4 versus any other turn. But Hoey's not out of it yet. Still has this Kaito, has the blowout like you talked about.
Yeah, I mean, Grayson basically had this draw in game 2, and Hoey seemed very unfazed. So we'll have to see, if Hoey can pull out a miracle like that last game. As we see, looks like Kaito's going to tick up and get in there for 4. Didn't quite get a good look. I think there might be a Go for the Throat in Matthew's hand. So that can at least take care of the Zur, as well as that blowout that we discussed.
Yep. And it looks like there's also a Fairy Mastermind, but we're just holding up that instant speed blowout. Another Zur in hand for Grayson.
Cool.
So if Hoey does decide to fight over the life linking part of things, looks like at the beginning of combat, we are going to blot out. That's going to get rid of that Overlord. Zur can attack, if you want to get that 1 point in. That does matter.
So Zur coming in, and what does Grayson as a follow-up? So we do have a Binding. It's going to take care of the Kaito. And Matthew does not. Oh, does currently have a Restless Reef, so there's a little bit of pressure. I think there is a Curiosity, a Siren. No, no Curiosity.
Yeah.
Mastermind, Siren, and some lands.
Yep. Fountain Port and Reef in hand, notably when it comes to those lands as well. So they're not weak ones. As Hoey, this Leyline Binding is definitely a problem, but not out of the woods is Grayson, as Hoey can very easily, stabilize this, and you draw one too many lands. It can go poorly. Hoey attacking Grayson's deck with his hand there, hoping it goes out better for him. Gets an island off the top. He's going to play the Reef for turn, wants to have that available on a future turn, clean up his mana, and passes back. Has Fairy Mastermind and Go for the Throat available. We're going to see Leyline Binding get turned into a creature here on the end of turn 6/6.
So now it'll be very curious to see if Hoey wants to save the Go for the Throat, because you remember last game he kind of held it for a while. We're going to fire it off now. And that is going to be 6 coming across. Matt's going to fall down to 13. And yeah, from here it's if we have something like a Kaido off the top, Kaido can lock down the binding for a turn. Well, not in the face of that second Zur. That's going to be pretty tough here for Matthew.
Yeah, Matthew gonna bin the Elspeth Smite. You see him kind of tank on it for a second there. It's not the worst card in the world, but decides, hey, I need to hit some fatty cards. As we're gonna untap after a land go from Hoey.
Yeah, two Masterminds pretty good, but you're not really going to be racing a Zur here. Is there any sort of like triple block? I mean, I guess the Reefs, right? Yeah, okay. This is something we saw last game where Grayson doesn't really want to attack into those Restless Reefs. So Hoey gets to it's interesting where Hoey gets to not play any spells, hold up his mana to hold up threaten the Reef, blocking the Leyline Binding, but then Grayson's just not going to play into it, and then Hoey gets to use his mana on some other stuff. This is kind of exactly how that last game played out.
Yeah, and the more I watch this Dimir versus Zur matchup, the more I think, these Zur players have some really strong draws that maybe, completely run away with the games, but it's not as good as maybe they think it is, right? Like, Hoey has not had did not have a particularly good draw in game 2 and stalled it out. Had a good draw this game, but was on the back foot, and Grayson almost had the perfect draw. So, I think there's a lot of play to this matchup, and also, you just can't control the fact that you're playing, 26 lands in your Zur deck. You need to play them all, and you're just going to have some games where you draw one too many lands. It's a tough place to be.
And honestly, Mason, the card that, this is going to sound a little weird, but the card that has looked the most impressive to me from Matthew's side of things is actually Restless Reef, where it's really kind of difficult for the domain deck to kill that card at instant speed because binding doesn't hit it. And it's also difficult for them to make some sort of inroads in any sort of attack with these big enchantment creatures because the Reef can just threaten the trade for them.
Devin, we drawn 2 up the beanstalks. I think we're trying to throw away our Leyline Binding so that we can Sunfall, kill those Fairy Masterminds, and then play the beans.
And then the beans, okay.
We'll have to see. It looks like we're going to have Enduring Curiosity, and this is tough.
Double block?
Grayson might be a little happy because he will get one of those Fairy Masterminds gone, but it was definitely not the trade he was looking for. I think he wanted that creature land gone as Kaito is back on the battlefield here. But Grayson does have a lot of beanstalks he can go up, a little adventure.
And Hoey does not have a counter spell, right? I think we're looking with a Mockingbird and a Mastermind.
So this will give a redraw to both players. It will be Grayson's second card drawn this turn.
So choosing not to go for the Sunfall first. Maybe Grayson's okay with there being 1 copy of Mastermind on the battlefield.
Yeah, 1 is so much different than 2, right?
Right.
I think that's what kind of where Grayson's coming from. And also maybe has, redrawn into some things where it's like, actually, I kind of just need more gas, right? Like if you drew some lands there, Sunfall, now we're going to draw 2. And, Hoey does have the Kaito, does have the creature lands in the Restless Reefs, but Grayson's at 21, we're getting a lot of cards, and this is going to undo that drawing so many lands thing we talked about.
Right, and the Curiosity got the chump block, or not chump block, but the Curiosity traded for the binding, so that Curiosity didn't get swept up in the Sunfall. And yeah, look at this. Matthew still has end of turn Mastermind, has the ability to attack with Mastermind, Kaito, and the Restless Reef to draw 3 more cards, and this is after a Sunfall.
Yeah, it just shows just how much power there is in both of these decks here. As we're gonna have to see what Grayson's gonna want to do. Has a lot of lands in hand and a Vivian. That Vivian could come in handy here.
There was one interesting moment last turn that I kind of wanted to point out where
Mhm.
Grayson played the Beanstalk and Matthew could have played the second Mastermind in response, but very heads up play for Matthew. Didn't want to expose that other Mastermind into a potential Sunfall.
Expect nothing less from Matthew Hoey. We're going to see just an attack here with these two creatures. Draw 2 cards from Curiosity. That means we're probably going to see a 0 here from Kaito. None of the realm possibilities that you just like plus afterwards when you draw some good cards, but most likely Hoey's going to want to just surveil and set up the draws a bit more and make sure we don't draw too many lands. It looks like we're going to probably start with a Mockingbird here on this Fairy Mastermind. Now that means if the Beans gets triggered even with another Wrath, we'll get a couple cards out of it. Maybe I missed when the Kaito was activated. Oh, it looks like Hoey was maybe saying, what am I going to do with this Kaito? And is going to just 0, bends a Kaito, bends a land, draws a Duress. That's a good one. Let's see what you got going on, Grayson. You just drew 6 cards. We see some of our competitors watching. This might be the last match of the round
The glare.
here.
The
We
glare,
have
I
Vivian
can't see it.
and land and Zur and one unknown card because of the glare there. Don't worry, Devin, I got you. 5 minutes left in the round here as these players are going to start picking up the pace. They do not want to get a draw.
I would recommend Matthew take the glare because the glare seems to be the most important card. He does go with the glare.
It was a Sunfall. Okay. So that was probably the best one to pick there. Yeah, and that Vivian read, it can kill the Mastermind, which is kind of nice here for Grayson, but will draw Hoey some cards because it will trigger the Beans. As we're seeing, Theo, Dom, other competitors, they want to see what's going on in this future match area, just like us. Grayson plays land for turn and looks to be lining up this Vivian. Get some redraws here. Oh, picked up the Overlord of the Hauntwoods.
So the Vivian can take care of the Curiosity. It's going to be a lot more cards here for Matthew, though, because we have 2 Masterminds in play. Matthew just has his own Beanstalks.
That's true, yeah. I mean, the Vivian can also kill the Fairy Masterminds, right? It kills creatures with flying as well.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's kind of like fighting over the Curiosity. I think Grayson just needs to turn off those Masterminds. One of the things I think about Standard a lot is like who's got their card engines going, and the Beans can beat a lot of things. But when your Beans are, like you just said, drawing Hoey cards too, they become a lot worse. And it looks like he is going to fight over that Curiosity. Makes me think maybe a Sunfall got picked up or something of that nature. As we are going to tap
cards.
4 mana. Oh, White Overlord. Okay, that's something that sort of fights through the...
Yeah, I mean, the Overlord's pretty good against these Masterminds. You can also maybe just chump block the Kaito for a little bit. You're also at 21. You can take a couple of hits from the Kaito. I think there's only one emblem currently for Matthew, so, doesn't have to worry too much about that. Yeah, Overlord, really good blockers against the Masterminds. And, I mean, Grayson, just now going to pass the turn with 7 cards in hand. And this is, I'm not positive this game will finish.
Well...
It's going to be close, right?
Yeah, I think the only way I imagine it's really finishing is sort of, Grayson just overruns Hoey with some Zuri type stuff. It's possible, Hoey can just like fire off enough kill spells to push the distance. We might also see some stuff going on here. Remember, we did the sudden death rule in Champs.
Right.
So we actually don't have draws happening here. That is my bad. I forgot about that. I believe it's highest life total. Production will let me know here in a second.
I thought it was first player to take damage.
Is it first player to take damage?
We can double check with production.
If it's first player to take damage, then Matthew Hoey is in
a commanding position.
Yeah, a good spot. Right. Now, Grayson does have these flyer, like flying a lot of little creatures and weird things. It could Zur and activate a bunch of beings, but we'll have to see exactly what plays out here. It might also just be, Grayson can run away with this here. A lot to think about, a lot of options here. Hoey's going to start by attacking with everything. And I believe, we started this here with a tick up of the Kaito, so that Kaito's quite big.
Yep, so we have two emblems here. So if Grayson decides to trade for both Masterminds, oh yeah, we have this too, right? I forgot about that. So that can trade there. You trade, so you're taking 5, putting Grayson down to 16. And then the Curiosity comes back as an enchantment. Matt's going to pick up 1 more card off of the Curiosity. Matt always just has too many cards in hand. Doesn't even know what to do with them.
Flip Pit Drowner was the pickup. Spyglass Siren coming down.
But I gotta say, Mason. All right, so it looks like we're getting word from production. They play 5 turns, and then the higher life total wins. That is our sudden death rule for this evening.
Yeah.
Now I didn't think we'd get to see any sudden death, but we might be approaching that now, Mason.
Yeah, I mean, we still have a couple minutes left on the clock. It was 5 minutes a few minutes ago. Vivian's going to tick up, find the Overlord of the Flood Pits. That's a good way to sort of, smooth out your draw here in the late game. It's going to draw cards off Beans and draw cards off the siphon. We also have a Zur in hand. That's pretty
So
powerful.
I wonder, now that we know it's 5 turns and higher life total wins, I wonder who that favors. I think it's, I mean, if
Grayson's
it's
life total is
higher life
also
total
just
after
wrong,
five
by the way.
turns, yeah, Grayson should have taken 5 last turn, I believe.
Yeah.
But Grayson does have the ability to gain a little bit of extra life too. If like something like herd migration were to come off the top, that could be some life. Sunfall to buy some time, but then Hoey also has the Restless Reef. This is going to get really interesting.
Yep. And I
Zur
think,
too is something we got to think about.
yeah, here comes another Overlord of the Mistmoors. Draw 2. We've fought through these fairy masterminds. We've got these moths going, and I think we're just trying to set up, play a Zur, and just activate, swing a bunch, and actually win this game.
Gain
Yeah,
like 20 life or whatever, and then just be like, "Hey, Matthew, could you do me 40 damage in 2 turns?"
I think he'll just win. I mean, I think he will
That's
win
fair.
because of the sudden death rules, but I think he's just gonna get a bunch of moths. I mean, these overlords are just Grave Titan in a lot of ways, right? How many Grave Titan swings can you live through? I personally, not many. As we are going to see the Zur come
And the
down,
Zur.
activate immediately on the White Overlord. No Tashani's Tidebinder. That's huge.
Yeah, I think Hoey's hand is 2 more Kaidos, a Flood Pit Drowner, and 3 lands. So
Yep.
not really exactly where you want to be.
We're going to
But
see
yeah,
the race
this
activity.
turn is huge for Grayson. Even as you mentioned, I mean, Grayson has a chance to just win the game with all these flyers. But even if Grayson can't deal lethal, just the huge life swing plus 4 bodies to block, it's going to be nearly impossible for Hoey to get, to have a higher life total at the end of the next 5 turns, assuming that we're close to time.
Yep. And Grayson still has things like activate my Zur again, all these sort of things. We have Flood Pit Drowner coming down. That's going to tap down the Zur. That's going to clear the air. We can get some more curiosity triggers. As I think our players are about to hit turns, we'll put a dice on the screen for you when that does happen ASAP there. Speak of the
I see
devil,
a die at the top.
production, tell them to push it down a little more.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, we
Just a
can't
little
see
bit.
it. As these players are thinking here, we're going to see a little bit of a slowdown now. Now that we're in turns, we're going to
Okay.
take a second.
So now let's think about this. I don't think we have Grayson's life total updated from the the life he gained last turn. Because I'm trying to think of like how does Hoey really get out of this? Because Hoey does have the 1 extra attack step, right? If he's turned 1, he gets 1, 3, and 5. So I mean, there like if you get a thing, so you kill the Zur. And we can animate that in response. And then you can like Kaido down a moth token. You can try to set up a turn where you go, Kaido a moth, play another Kaido, Kaido a moth, play another Kaido. It's going to be tough, Mason.
It's going to be very tough. We're going to see exactly what's going on here as we're answering some of our things. We're tapping down some stuff with Kaido. Zur's gone, so they've lost Hexproof Lifelink.
Oh, God. So there is what? 2 stun counters, 4 impending, and then the 7 to represent that it's a 7/7. Okay. Look, I will say this, Mason. I appreciate that the dice are different colors.
Yep, that's helpful. Very helpful. As we're seeing an attack here with everything, the moths are in the way.
So you just go 1 on each. Ooh, we're getting word from production that life totals are currently correct. Okay, so this gets a little bit more interesting now. Because Grayson's got to be a little bit careful. With only at 17.
Really wants to fight over this Kaito. Could risk a kill spell getting in the way, but remember that Kaito is extra big from those 2 emblems next to Enduring Curiosity. And Ho is thinking, do I maybe ninjutsu on one of these Flood Pit Drowners, get the damage in with the Kaito? Sudden death changes things a little bit. Decides against it, it's just going to kill all the moths.
Yeah, so the thing about that is if you ninjutsu Kaido off of either the Siren or the Drowner, then the other Kaido doesn't deal damage to the moths. So you get in 3 extra damage, but then Grayson just attacks you back for 8. So it's like that doesn't line up too well. So damage coming
Well,
across.
I think Hoey can still ninjutsu though, right? Because isn't there a step after
Oh, at
damage?
end of combat. Yes, that
Yes,
is
and
correct.
yeah, and so he gets his triggers from the curiosity, and then now if he wants to,
Oh
can
my
pick up the flood
goodness.
pit drowner and save a
Mason,
mana on this Kaito.
there was a Shieldred picked up as well, especially with those two beanstalks in play.
Mhm.
That might actually just be it for Hoey.
Yeah, I mean the Shieldred will push Grayson down, and then I mean all your best cards are a lot of mana.
Right. And the only ways that Grayson has to answer it are Sunfall. Well, I guess outside of
Get
Get Lost.
lost.
If
Yeah.
it's Sunfall or Binding, then you're on the hook for at least 4 damage off the binding. Or off the beanstalks, rather, excuse me. So yeah, that Shieldred is a huge pickup here and can also shuffle the Overlord away. So now Grayson's got nothing on the battlefield. Hoey does technically has to get 1 more damage in, but presumably can do that with the Shieldred. Or
Yep.
2 more damage in, rather.
You get two more. There's also multiple turns too, right? We're on
Yes,
turn
Hoey
one
is,
of turns. So like,
yeah, 2 more attack steps.
yeah, this is definitely not the end of things yet. As we're gonna see a swamp into that Shieldred. Come on down.
Okay, now what is Grayson working with? I saw a Zur, but only up the
I
beanstalk in play, which makes things kind of awkward. Although maybe 4 life is all you need for Grayson.
Yeah, I was gonna say if Grayson can draw like a get lost here, answer the Shieldred, play the Zur, gain some life, play some Overlords. Remember, we're on turn two. Grayson might just be able to actually, once again, win the game with the
This game
Zur
is so
near the last
wild.
turn of turns.
Looks like it was a Smite. So Smite, Overlord of the Flood Pits, Hauntwoods, Zur, Beanstalk, and then I think
Mhm.
lands. That's not what Grayson's looking for.
Yep. And we'll just go digging with Vivian, see if we can find something that we do want. Yeah, we got the blue Overlord. It's not exactly what we want because of the Shieldred, but if we're going to win this game, we maybe need to take some Beanstalk triggers to find an actual kill spell.
Well, it's weird because if you Overlord to trigger the beanstalks. I guess they happen one at a time.
They
So
do,
if you
yeah.
find the get lost off of the first bean trigger, you can kill the Shieldred before the second bean trigger, which would have you going to 10. And then you can go Zur, activate, go back to 14.
You can
But
also attack with the beans like
yeah,
as Zerg creatures, and if Shieldred blocks, they trade, and
sure.
that's nice too because they have Death Touch, so you can gain a little bit of life beforehand, so you don't just like die to maybe a Mastermind type thing in the next turn.
Because I think ideally what Grayson wants to do is just like set up a bunch this turn, play a couple overlords, and then hope that next turn Zur activate gains him enough life. But the big issue is that Shieldred. I think without that Shieldred, Grayson would have been in a pretty reasonable spot.
Ooh, and we just drew them
Grayson
both. Can
picking up.
take 4.
Yeah. Not sure if it mattered. Didn't know if there was the get lost in the first card, but yeah, did not resolving those one at a time is.
Yeah, even a binding too, right? Because you'll save yourself at least the 2 life from the second one if it was the first. Looks like we did draw the binding.
Well, you ended up taking 4 more, right?
Well, you do, but you can respond to the first beans if it's the first card.
Sure. Okay, that's what
So
you're saying.
yeah, little things they do matter. And Hoey, yeah, he's kind of like whatever. I've got this Kaito, I've got these creature lands. What do you
And
have?
and now the other thing you have to consider is, well, Grayson. First of all, Grayson at 4, Hoey can just reef or what have you, but also deck size because Grayson still maybe has to commit a little bit more to the battlefield to make sure he has enough stuff to attack with next turn. So that is something to consider as well because if he say casts 2 more overlords, I can't quite tell how many cards are left, but I can assure you there's not a lot.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's something to think about. I think maybe Grayson's best route to victory here is play Zur. And you see everyone's talking to the people in the bathroom and Hoey's like, yeah, it's a crazy game. But we play Zur, we activate on something like the Beanstalk, we get in, we buffer our life total a little bit, and then we just hold. Right? We just hold up. We got this Elf's Smite. We've got the flyer covered. We've got activate on another Beanstalk. We got that covered.
Did
Then on the following turn, activate everything and get this huge life swing.
Did Grayson pick up another Overlord of the Mistmoors? Because
Mhm.
having 2 blockers would be huge here.
Yeah, he has 2 because he picked up one a few turns ago and then picked up one this
Okay.
turn,
Yeah, that's
I believe.
massive.
Yeah. And drew a get loss as well. That is big. That's going to make it so that creature land is less of a problem. It's the only card in the deck that can really answer it is the get lost.
And 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know if Grayson has played a land this turn. But if he hasn't, you could go land another Overlord to make 4 blockers and still hold up the Get Lost. Because
Yeah,
ideally, if you're Grayson, you want to play one more Overlord this turn, so you can have a huge, like a massive attack with multiple of them next turn.
because remember,
I guess
next
the
turn will be
binding
Grayson's
too.
last turn of turns.
Yeah. Now, remember, Grayson doesn't have to deal Hoey lethal damage. He just has to gain enough life to make sure that Hoey can't kill, get lower. Hoey can't get Grayson down to low enough the following turn. This is a very
Remove the discard
interesting
there.
dynamic.
Yeah, we have Leyline binding up here, and I think what Grayson's going to try and do is both players know they have to kind of deal damage, and I think Grayson's hoping that Hoey plays very defensive here, right? Sort of like stocks up a battlefield, then Grayson can go like binding, get lost, play Zur, activate, attack with everybody, and then now Hoey gets the last attack. But we've gained so much life and we've sort of overwhelmed the counterattack that Hoey can't really lower the life totals.
There is also something else to consider where deck size versus double reef. Maybe that. I mean, I think
it
it
won't
looks
matter
like more than 8 cards, but
no, Grayson doesn't get the last turn, right? So like you have
sure,
to
because the
do
game ends on turn
exactly
5.
8 here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I mean it's possible, but that looks like more to 8 than me.
Yeah.
Also, we know Grayson has a get lost, right? So like
True.
probably would get lost one of the reefs, especially because if he just did that, Hoey would be leaving himself dead on board. As the Spyglass Siren is going to attack, make sure to say in the attacker step here, Grayson, as you say in the blocker step, things get bad for you quick. Elspeth Smite coming on down.
The other big question is, does Hoey have a go for the throat? Because if you can go for the throat, the Zur, then Grayson's not going to gain any life. That's the big question. I don't think he has a go for the throat in hand.
I don't think so either. I know he bottomed one on turn 1. So there's one in his deck somewhere, and we did shuffle with the Flood Pits.
Tishana's maybe?
Yeah, Leyline Binding coming down. Draw 2.
I think Hoey's hand is 2 Kaidos, a Mastermind, and 2 lands.
I saw Hoey put his hands together like a prayer. I think he's praying for no Zur, as I think this is the 4th Zur Devon. Now, Grayson's drawn a ton of cards this game, but I think Hoey's hoping to fade. We're going to activate this Vivian first. See what we can get here. Looks like we found a land, Cavern of Souls. That's a nice one. I think we had one on Human already.
Yeah, backup Cavern on Human, just in case.
Yeah.
It's buried somewhere in the 10,000 other lands.
I like it too because it's like, who really remembers what those caverns are on? It's been such a long game. As here comes Zur, and we're going to start activating.
Yeah, and I don't think I see a go for the throat in Hoey's hand. I think this is going to be Grayson taking it down. And I mean, to be honest with you, even if the sudden death rules weren't in place, he would still just have enough.
This is just lethal here. Yep.
Whew.
Whew. Congratulations to Grayson. Moving on to 4 and 3. Both these players still live for our top 8. Remember, it is first to 8 wins will get you in top 8, or if you get 6 losses, you're out. So that's going to do it for this round. We're going to take a quick break and set up our last round of the day with Standard. We'll be back in just a few minutes.